Welcome, everyone. Hello again. My name is Ilias. It's great to have you with us this evening or in another time of day, depending on your time zone. My name is Ilias, and on today's Tea Break webinar series, we'll be covering the 3D map template and specifically its more advanced features. I trust that you can hear me properly and you will be able to see my screen, which I will start sharing right now. And also let me start presenting what we have in store for you today. As I mentioned, today's Tea Break webinar series, I trust you have your mug with you, is focused on the 3D map template and its advanced features. The 3D map template is a very, very powerful template incorporating a host of different functionalities. So you cannot really cover it just with one webinar. Let me move this little bar here. Also joining me as well is my colleague Olivia, who will be overseeing any questions that you might have. Just pop them in the chat, and also Helena and other great colleagues. Today's agenda will be a recap of the 3D map template, when we will move on and start visualizing the Great Resignation. If you've been following the news, you may have heard about this already. Then we will be preparing and adding the data that we want to visualize. After that, we will be using Extrusion, which is an advanced 3D map template feature. And also we will walk you quickly through how to use raster tiles, which is a different kind of base map. So let's get started. As I mentioned, the 3D map template, it's very powerful, and we constantly enrich it with more and more features. And in short, this template allows you to visualize very large data sets of points and extrude your regions using WebGL technology. And I'm mentioning that because WebGL technology is quite performant. So you can visualize very big data sets that usually, if you popped them into other kinds of map templates, they usually struggle quite a bit. And then you can combine your maps in a Flourish story to animate and tell a specific visual digital story based on your data and based on different maps, which is exactly what we will be doing today. Right here, we have a series of previous webinars, both for an introduction to the template and on using its points feature that Olivia covered in a previous webinar, which is very useful. So moving on. Oops. Yeah. Let's start with today's project, which is the Great Resignation. Apparently, a lot of people, especially in the US, but in general as well, but in the US it has been easier to track. Apparently a big movement and a steep increase of people choosing to leave their jobs due to the pandemic and factors that have been created by the pandemic. And as I mentioned, we will be mapping it in the US using our 3D map template in order to be able to put the movement in context, because you may be reading a lot of articles about that, but it's very useful to be actually able to pinpoint the trend through numbers and visualize based on these numbers as well. And we will not only visualizing one point, but various points in this trend in order to be able to tell and follow it throughout these latest pandemic months. First of all, we will speak about our data source. We will be using data about people leaving their employment from the United States Bureau of Labor Statistics. So I have the link right here. So let's open it. As we are able to see, we have different data, but mainly two types. One about levels of people leaving their jobs in thousands, and rates. Every data point is about a different United States state, and we also have a total about the whole United States. In this case, we will be using the rates in order to be able to better compare the amount of the workforce in each state that opted to leave their employment instead of total numbers, which will leads us to maybe misleading results, because obviously there are way more people leaving their jobs in states with big populations like California or Texas compared to states with smaller populations like Montana. We will be using Google Sheets in order to wrangle our data. So we will be starting by grabbing our table, nice and easy from here. We are copying our data, and then we are doing Sheets new, and we are creating a new Google Docs spreadsheet. Let's name it resignations underscore data. And we will be pasting our data here. As we have mentioned in previous webinars, our data must be prepared in order to be able to fit into the template. And in this case, we must clean them up a bit. So we will be losing this top row here because it's not needed, and deleting it as well. And also we must only keep the rates. So we will proceed to delete the total numbers of people. So we have November 2020 and August 2021, September 2021, October 2021, and provisional data for November 2021. Allow me to retry to delete those two columns. Okay, this did the trick. We will be exporting the file as a CSV dataset by downloading it as a CSV. It's already. We also need to clean them a bit more. Better to do it here than on Flourish, although we can do that as well. We will be losing this empty row of data. So let's re-download it as a CSV. Let's go back to our presentation. Now we have our data, but we need to add our data to our base map. And how we will be going through this. Unlike the projection map template, the 3D map template uses base maps in order to draw country or county in general region outlines. So in this case, we need to overlay a GeoJSON of the US states on top of our global 3D base map. And as a small hack and workaround, we don't need to actually search in Google for a proper base map, for a proper GeoJSON to overlay on our base map. We can go to the projection map starting point, and specifically the one featuring US states, and grab the GeoJSON from there. So as you can see here, we have US states. We will be using, we will go to the regions dataset and we will be downloading it as GeoJSON. It is kind of a newish feature, this one, downloading as GeoJSON. So let's go to our 3D map proper. We have a US county regions, which is basically all the counties of the US. We will be uploading in the regions dataset our GeoJSON file containing our states. We will be opting for the upload data data merge options because we don't want to keep any of the counties. We just want the states, so we are fine with overwriting what it is already on the region sheet. We are importing it. We are binding the correct columns to the proper data bindings, the geometry on one, and the name is column B containing the state names. Value is superfluous, and category in this case. And then we will proceed to add our employment data by opting for upload data and merge, because we want to merge these two data sets. This is our resignations CSV file that we exported just before. And due to the heuristic nature of the data merge feature of Flourish, we can see that it pre-selected columns containing the same names, and in this case, containing the same values, and in this case is the names of the different US states. In this case, I forgot to name our the column containing the US state names in our CSV file, which we will be fixing right now, and we will be keeping the one more current data point that does not match, which is the total number of retirees, of people leaving their jobs for the US states. And as we can see now, our data have been merged. we have plugged some helpful resources in here in order to be able to refresh your memory on how to merge datasets and how to customize the style of your 3D maps. Now we will proceed to bind our data and also create and opt for a more appropriate color scale. Let's start by visualizing the data of people leaving their jobs in November 2020. And we will be binding column F to the value data binding. Immediately our map got colored. Let's pick something that's more easily legible by going to the regions, opting for a red-orange color scale. And since usually this data range from 1 point-ish, 2.5 to around 4-ish, we will break the color bins according to this range. So around 3 to 4 color bins would be more than appropriate. So we will opt for a binned color scale and select 4 bins. We can see that in our pop-ups, we have a bunch of values, which makes sense because we already know what we are visualizing, but for the reader, this would be a bit hard to follow. So let's head to the pop-ups section, opt for custom pop-ups. Our pop-up header would be the name of the state. So column B, name, will be using curly brackets, name. And we want for the reader to be able to understand what happened in each month. So we will opt for the following pop-up in November 2020. How many people left their jobs? We will be using the values of column F, and the name of this column is November 2020. In November 2020, curly brackets, number of people leaving their jobs, which is a rate in this case, so followed by %, of the workforce left their job. Let's see how this works out. So now we can see that it makes way more sense. Kentucky and Louisiana and generally southern states are quite big in this trend. In November 2020, we have already created a quick 3D map of this trend. But we can create a way more richer story using our extrusion feature, which is a feature that allows us to extrude regions and give them height according to a value in the region sheet, enabling you to be able to visualize beyond the standard coloring of regions based on a color scale, and essentially allowing you to tell a visual story based on a map with one more added way and giving added value to your map besides the usual coloring of your regions. So let's go ahead and do that. In order to do that, however, let's follow the instructions. we need to bind in the height of the data binding. We need to bind in the height data binding, I'm sorry, one column containing numeric values, and you'll see why that the fact that we can bind one column is important. Then we must head over to the regions seat and enable extrude regions. And then we must set a maximum and minimum height of the extruded regions. So let's see this in action. In this case, we will be binding column F containing data of people leaving their jobs in November 2020. So it's the same as our value data binding. Back on our regions options, we can see that the extrusion feature was enabled. If we remove it and go back, our extrusion feature is gone. So always to not forget data binding first and then options. We enable our extrusion. Here we can set the minimum and maximum height, and we can immediately see that our regions are now extruded. But we must go back to viewport and interaction and give our map a bit of a pitch in order to be able to better understand the fact that our map is now extruded. So let's opt for a 25 pitch in order to be able to follow the trend easier. We have done both of our steps. So as we can see, we have extruded regions and custom pop-ups explaining the values of its state. Let's not forget to name our visualization, resignation, November 2020, very quickly. However, since we can only use one data binding, we cannot use multiple data bindings and switch between different values in the same app as with the value data binding. If we can see here, for example, we can bind in the value data binding columns F to J containing all of our values. However, and we are able to switch between them. However, we cannot do the same for our height. We can only pick one column. So in order to solve this story, which is not this problem, which is not exactly a problem, we can use our story feature that not only will allow us to tell and present data for all of these months, but will also give us the ability to annotate and focus and create essentially a visual story of everything. So let's name it Great Resignation Story. It is already preloaded with our first slide, and add a bit of context. However, let's go ahead and create a different map using our extruded feature, and then proceed and add them to our story. Let's go back to our map, duplicate it, and visualize August 2021 by binding the proper columns to the relevant data bindings. As we can see immediately, Alaska is huge with a very big number of people leaving their jobs. And as we can see, because we are using custom pop-ups, we need to also change them as well in order to be able to pull data from the value column that we are using in this map, which is August 2021. In August 2021, in curly brackets, our value column. As you can see, 3.9% of the workforce of Alaska left their job in August 2021. I should note that the values are seasonally adjusted. So these are very big numbers. It's not due to seasonal changes in employment trends. Renaming our visualization. And then doing the same for the rest of the months. September. Oops, sorry, misclicked somewhere. The same for pop-ups. As we're able to witness, the trend kind of dissipated in September. Renaming our chart, resignation. September 2021, and then doing the same. One more, so bear with me. We are overrunning just a little bit, but it won't be long until we come to the end of our visualizing journey. So we are entering in the trend is back in full force in October. And last one, provisional data for November 2021. So let's add all this to a story and create a visual journey. And resignation, this should be named November 2021. Back to our projects page. and adding our charts. August 2021. As we can see, in 2021, Georgia, Kentucky remained at the high places. However, we can notice that a strong trend has gripped most of the central states as well. So we can zoom a bit in order to make the story more prominent, add and add the rest of our slides. In September, as we mentioned, the trend significantly slowed down, but in October, it was off to the races, which makes sense once the economy gets into full gear again. An explosion of notices is starting to come towards the surface, and with, in this case, the west central states taking the mantle. And our last slide should be the resignations about November 2021. And since we want to build a visual story, it's good to focus a bit more on regionals as well. So in this case, we can see that Alaska was the state with the biggest number of people quitting their job. So let's make a point of it. And let's focus on the west central states in this slide. And as we can see, 4% of the Colorado workforce opted to leave their job in October. So let's stress this point as well. Click on the pop-up. And now we can see a visual story telling and narrating the Great Resignation using our extrusion feature. Last but not least, let's quickly guide you through raster tiles, which is essentially a set of images that are stitched together in order to be able to draw them up, usually with different levels of detail, different zoom levels. It's non-customizable, so you cannot turn on or off layers or change style features. But many rich raster tiles exist, covering from old-timey map styles to satellite imagery. Here is a list of public raster tile servers, which will be proceed to open. And the way this works is you either use our 3D map template or our marker map one, as they both use 3D map base maps. Let's open our point map, our marker map template. On the base map settings, you opt for raster, and the scheme has to, the raster tile format should be along these lines, Z, X, Y, either a PNG or a JPEG. Let's use, in this case, the Stammen base map by copying the raster tile link and pasting it here on our base map. Something went awry. So let me retry again. This is highly unusual, but the devil's in the details. So I think this will do it. In case it doesn't, I have already a ready-made example. Yeah, for some reason it's being tricky today. So let me pull up one that I've already prepared very quickly. Here it is. Lovely. We have two different tile schemes, Web Mercator and one based on OS Geo. So if one work does not work, it's good to opt for the other. This may have been the problem that I encountered before as well. And also the tile size essentially spells out the width of each tile, and the smaller it is, it means that your map is of a higher resolution. As we are able to witness, as we focus, we can see different levels of detail. This is a map of dinosaur fossils in the UK, which is also one of our starting points in our template chooser. And again, sorry for briefly overrunning. As I mentioned, the 3D map template, it packs quite a punch, so always a lot to cover. We have some helpful resources for you prepared, such as our blogspot that presents both raster tile and the heat map and pop-up panels features, and also our always helpful help docs. Thank you very much for today's session. I hope it was helpful for you, and see you on our next Tea Break webinar series. And it was real pleasure showcasing you this powerful template today. Bye-bye.